Hey, what are you doing over there in the corner? Come closer and join me for a read-through of this Kashihon thriller, KAO, The Face, number 14, 1960, right here on GAIJINGUY. Good morning, Gaijingaggers. It's a good day today. The weather is crap, but I am going out to get my second vax shot, and so should you. But first, let's talk Kashihon. And today, the Kashihon comic that we are looking at is The Face, KAO, number 14 from 1960. We have a couple of interesting things in here, so let's go ahead and get started.
Let's start with the cover. This is one of the best covers I've seen for this mag. It says on the side, number 14, KAO, Face. Detective thriller, Tante Thriller. And there's a focus on the bad guy from the cover. And you've got the young whippersnapper, all full of piss and vinegar, ready to turn that corner and get shot up in a million pieces. It says Angel Bunko, NZ Bunko, which was the publisher, 150 yen. So, of course, this is the price for the Kashihon rental shops, normally not for purchase. We have this little notation up top here. It says Toshiba, and they're doing a transistor radio giveaway. And so obviously this magazine had a big sponsor, which is pretty interesting. That means it's a lot more mainstream than maybe we give a lot of Kashihon books credit for. Let's go ahead and take a look inside. So we open it up. We have the inner page with the keyhole and the creepy paranoid eyes, which reminds me of the noir movie with Gregory Peck. The dream sequences were designed by Salvador Dali. You've got all the typical Gekiga type effects. You've got minute cross-hatching, details on the gun. You've got the stippling, this time in reverse, stippling over here. You've got the abstract shapes coming in. And then, of course, you have to have words in English to give it that sophisticated feel. Okay, we have the opening graphic here by M.K. I think this is Murayama Kazuo, because his name is on some other titles in this series, but not in this mag itself. Murayama Kazuo started as a kamishibai guy, where he met Kata Koji, who is very instrumental in introducing people to kamishibai, such as Mizuki Shigeru, but also instrumental in introducing them to the Kashihon publishers, that many of them got their start in the next steps of their career. So Kata Koji, very important person in the history of Japanese comics. So he was introduced to Kodansha, and he debuted in Shonen Club. But when he was working for this series, he was already doing work for magazines. So you could say he was slumming, but like I said, this magazine is sponsored by Toshiba. You know, Kashihon, not as underground as we might think. Okay, now we have the index cowl. Index, and it shows us all the people, all the little features that they have. This illustration says it's by K. Noboru. We know who that is. That's Kawasaki Noboru, who we'll be talking about a little bit later. First story up is Kiri, the Fog by Yamamori Susumu. And this is what's interesting about this. It says here, it's a Gekiga Kobo sakuhin. So it's made as part of Gekiga Kobo. If you notice the logo here, this is the logo of Gekiga Kobo. Gekiga Kobo is basically born out of the Gekiga Zengen, the declaration of Gekiga, where several artists, very young artists, teamed together and decided that they wanted to do a new style of comics, different than Tezuka type manga. They wanted it to be for an older audience, more sophisticated, more serious, and the style to be more sophisticated as well. The fact is that at this time, they were playing with style and they were trying to do different effects, different things that you didn't see in typical magazine comics, but their level of skill wasn't quite up to magazine skill. So there's a few standouts, but in general, we're talking about beginners, people at the very start of their career and have not reached their peak. Far from it. So Yamamoto Susumu, he's a junior high buddy of a guy named Kei Motomitsu. That's another Kashihon artist, which we will probably come across in future episodes, especially when I do a video on Kage, shadow. Anyway, Yamamori and Kei, they did comics together. His son was an animator at Ghibli. And another note about Gekiga Kobo, with this mark, it was only active for about a year, 1959 to 1960, but it made a big splash. Besides the statement of this is what Gekiga is supposed to be, the first comics done labeled as Gekiga under this mark with that group is really what spread the influence of the style. To start anyway, I think we're going to find that SAITO Takao had a lot to do with the spread of Gekiga. So with many of these magazines, they start out in color. And there's some interesting stylistic choices with the guy with the sideways face. Kind of a crooked guy with a crooked face. So the art is, it's uneven. Lines are holding up, but it's a guy early in his career, obviously. There's some good action panels in there. Overall, the layout is solid. I love panels like this. It's a trope, but a good trope. Oh, boy, there's nothing sadder than a caper that ends with the money in the wind. Nothing sadder. Oh, except for maybe getting caught. All right, now what we got up next, this is Namba Kenji. Namba Kenji, Kenji Namba, Action Gekiga. And this is what's completely interesting. Kokubunji nite. So he's saying, I made this in Kokubunji. And this story is called Ura, but he's calling it Bakusaito, the backside. So first of all, I just want to say that already we're seeing an improvement in technique. There's differing line weights. Very consistent character design. Blacks. Spotting is quite solid. Keeps your eye moving through the page. So this guy already had it going on at this point. Now, even though there's no date listed on the mag anywhere that I can find, some of these Kashihon anthologies, man, do not give up the information easily. But luckily, we have some dates written on some of the pages of the art. So this next story, I neglected to mention that Namba Kinji, he studied how to do manga directly from one of the masters, Takano Yoshiteru, who I've mentioned several times already in this video series. He was an assistant to Saito Takao, right alongside our next artist, Kawasaki Noboru. This guy went from Kashihon straight into monthly and weekly magazines. One of his assistants was Nagayasu Takumi, who did Aito Makoto, Love and Truth, with Kajiwara Ikki. So that's that guy. All right, now I can look at the next story by Kawasaki Noboru. And throughout the story, he seems to have all of these interesting little notes. But what's interesting about, well, let's talk about his history. He's most well known for Star of the Giants, Kyoji no Hoshi, with Kajiwara Ikki, who is a very popular writer, very instrumental in building the Spokon sports konjo movement. I am a lot more interested in his Western, Koyano Shonen Isamu, which I translate as Isamu, Boy of the Wild Frontier. Yes. Which I went to buy last week and was denied. It was somebody had already bought it. Another interesting fact. He's originally from Osaka, but now lives about an hour north of me in a place called Kikuchi in Kumamoto, doing character designs for different localities, including the characters Gogaku and Hinoko for the Aso area, Mount Aso, which has one of the biggest calderas in the world. Since he lives only an hour away, I'd really like to try to run into him somehow, seriously, and ask him about the Asama series and, of course, about the Kashihon work that he did. So let's dive in. So the very first note says Kokubunji Honda Shinden. I think that might be the station. Kondo Hotel. And then it says Eikaku. So I think that means he drew it. And then it says 1960 January. And on the next page, it says, Music Coffee Lily no Nikai, second floor of Music Coffee Lily. Also says 1960, January. And then it says social. So, not sure exactly what that means. He signed it again, this page as well. This is a story about a bumbling assassin. He says that everyone makes fun of him, but I guess he still gets jobs. So on page 70, we have another note. This time it says, Kohi Bijin no Izu, or Iru? Not sure. Bijin no Iru Lily. So I think he might be saying he's back at Lily, that cafe, and there's a beautiful woman there. So he's drawing these at cafes, which seems a rather bohemian type of lifestyle. Kind of cool, fitting with the mood, a little bit noirish mood, of course, in these hard-boiled mags. The problem with this guy is they don't show it, but he's killed both the bosses. See, they're in heaven. And he was trying to play them against each other, be smart, like Yojimbo or something. And he basically didn't leave anybody behind that could pay him. So, SOL. Anyway, that was... I didn't even tell you the title. Aru Kuroshia. Aru Kuroshia. So, an assassin. Up next, we have the Fujin Jiro series. So this is probably a recurring character in this mag. This is Jigoku ni Shindo Tore, Find the Way to Hell, or Take the Path to Hell. It's probably more correct. This is by Koike Kiyoshi. And again, art style is pretty solid, but I could not find anything about this guy. I just saw his name on several Kashihon titles. I did notice this badge, and it reminded me very much of it says Goto, which is a family name. Reminded me very much of the Gekiga Kobo badge. So mostly a Kashihon guy. But he had decent skills. Can I go back for a second? I just want to say, this first green page, something about the printing, it looks like it's almost been stamped on. You know, it hasn't quite, feels like the ink didn't soak into the page. You know, it's got a interesting effect. And I love these outlines. Whenever they break from the regular panels, it's always interesting. Sometimes they use it a little too much, but otherwise, I like that they're playing with the medium, using the long panel. This is the technique that you would see in American comics sometimes, is the sideways text, or the not sideways, but diagonal text, to give it a little more dynamism. I'm hearing sneezing in the background, which means we will soon be visited by the ghost of summer past. No, just my dog waking up. It's super early in the morning, folks. You know, you gotta love a comic that has a guy with a patch saying, wah ha 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 ha. I always love a good wah ha ha in the morning. All right, next story. This is Futatsu no Kage, The Two Shadows, by Nishimura Hideo. He signed it here again, January 25th, 1960. So I'm not sure when this came out, but I'm guessing it came out pretty soon after January. I know that they rushed these to press. There was no long editorial process. He was very active, this guy, Nishimura, very active in Kashihon. So I don't know much about him, but I found this curious item. How to talk to people through pictures. So he's basically making instructional comics. And this one is how to talk to people. But even more interesting than that one is how to do hypnotism in pictures. And this, of course, also is comics, a manga version of how to do hypnotism. So I'm really tempted to get myself a copy and see what that was all about. So anyway, this again, obviously early in his career, the proportions are not great. His cartoony stuff, so much better than his realistic stuff. The heavy pen on the, I don't think it's brush because the line is quite even. Anyway, it's not great. It's not a good effect. Character design is not the best either, but you have this panel when you've got the friend saving the main character from his dastardly father. And it says, Teacher. I don't know, that's quite a interesting choice of the holding the face. That's a very tender moment. And in the call-outs, Teacher, Ken-chan. I mean, maybe it's just how I'm reading it, but I don't know, it's quite a bromance going on there. So that's quite interesting. I don't think I've seen that in a Kashihon comic so far. So here's the sponsor, Toshiba. There's a quiz. There's the quiz. You have to solve the murder. And you can win a transistor radio. There's an ad for another Angel Bunko series, X Saksen. So Plan X. Which always sounds like a good plan, right? So here's the mystery. There's the murdered guy in his study or tiny apartment. It's a weird tiny room. Here's the layout from the top. There's 2 doors. 2 killers went in at the same time. One guy from the west, one guy from the east. See, it's got a compass pointing north. Which one is the killer? And if you don't mind me giving my take, I think it's the west guy who killed him, because the east guy obviously missed and hit the window up high over here. So I'm going to go for this guy. I think you could make a case for if he was really low, maybe the bullet went through him and into the glass. But I'm going to say nah. So Toshiba, send me that radio. Okay, this is like the reader's corner. These are fans, some solid ones. Sending in art, solid. This goes back to my idea that Japan is a much more visual culture. And so readers' pages were designed for that in mind. And people mostly sent in visuals. This struck me soon after I came to Japan. I was watching all these TV shows, and people would send in art through fax machines to the studios, and they would have like questions on them, etc. And they would all be anonymous with their various fake TV names. This has art sent in from Gekiga Kobo Kenkyū Kai. And so this is a club who is into Gekiga, I suppose. They probably had their own zine. It's based in Kumamoto. And I'm already asking people if they knew anything about this, because it's got the address. And I've already got a line on somebody who might know something about it. But very curious. Yeah. All right. Let's get into the next story. This is Reisha ga toru toki, When the Train Went by Nagai Ikuro. I want to say his name is. I probably have that wrong. But anyway, I'll fix it in the subs, right? This says that he started drawing this in September of 59. So that took a while to get published. You have Applehead Man, which is a little bit Dick Tracy. Proportions are nuts. The big head, the small bodies, doesn't quite work in a serious work. This guy kills Applehead. He covers the sound as the trains go by, and he thinks he's scot-free. But he's not, because look at that. Too much of a disparity, I feel. It doesn't work. Anyway, he's not safe because a cop comes in with a photographer and a photo of him committing the murder. And basically the photographer happened to have his camera and was taking pictures as the train went by. Dun, dun, dun. So, crime doesn't pay, folks. All right. The last story, we have the Dosuguroi Machi, the very black town. And this is a coal mining town. And you have this mountain of shale and detritus. So when you dig for coal, you have a whole bunch of stuff that you can't do anything with it. And they made a whole mountain of it. And it basically dominates the landscape. It's very oppressive, this mountain of shale. Look at that. What does that remind me of? It reminds me of Battle Angel Alita, Gammu, with the town that's made of scrap metal town or junk town. I actually don't know what it was translated into in English. It makes me wonder, because I couldn't find much about this artist, Joe Takeshi, even though he's a very active Kashihon creator. Couldn't find a whole lot of a post-Kashihon career. But I wonder if he was from Omuta, because Omuta, where Koga Shinichi and Hagiomoto is from, is a big coal mining town. But I'm sure there was, more than the one that I know. But even the bar is called Black Diamond. Everything is covered in soot. And so that's why it's called the Dosuguroi. Not just Kuroi, not just Black Town, but oppressively black town. Incredibly black town. Okay. I don't know why I marked this page. There's a good panel. You got some depth. This guy has depth. which you don't have a lot of in a lot of these early Kashihon titles. I just love this background element that he continues to use and to kind of frame the story as in the shadow of this industry, which might have been good for the town, but was not an easy industry to work in. So, quite a long story. And here, we've got some blood, we've got some gaga action, and then ending with a sunset and the family deciding to stick together to take care of their coal mine or whatever. This is the saddest image in this whole magazine of the boy pushing his bike home from school. And it's got a little afterwards, but basically look forward to the next issue. And that's it. KAO Noboru. KAO, the face, number 14. Thanks for joining. I will see you next time.